Hey, welcome to Session 3, Bible Studies for Life, in the winter of 2019. This is a great series of lessons that we're in on these hard questions of life and hard questions certainly into Scripture and questions of challenge to the Christian faith. The question this week is, does absolute truth exist? And what an interesting question and a really great introduction to it this week as we look at three different passages out of the book of John, starting with John chapter 18, and this story of Jesus and his confrontation meeting with Pilate there near the end of his life, as Pilate is trying to figure out what he's going to do with Jesus and how he's going to respond to the challenge from the Jewish leadership and their desire to have Jesus crucified and all of that. And so Pilate is having this one-on-one conversation with Jesus, where ultimately Pilate asked Jesus the question we find in chapter 18, verse 38, what is truth? What is truth? Now, boy, that's an interesting question, isn't it? This is the question at the heart of a lot of what's going on today in the world and what we call postmodernism. Postmodernism is a belief that kind of came out of the 20th century, early 20th century, really has grown through the colleges and universities over time and now just finds itself permeating every aspect of life. And it's interesting because postmodernism is not something new. Pilate here is exhibiting kind of the basic idea of postmodernism. We might think of today as kind of the postmodern mantra is there is no universal meta-narrative, which basically means there is no absolute and universal truth that applies to all people at all times. That's Pilate's question. What is truth? Is there any truth? That's an interesting idea because the mantra of postmodernism states the absolute truth, that there is no absolute truth. It's a contradiction by itself. On its face, it's a contradiction. How can you say, I know absolutely there is no absolute truth. I state that as an absolute truth. Well, it contradicts itself, right? It's not a new idea, though. Right out of the first century, here's Pilate. What is truth? And that's an interesting question because you might say, well, how do you answer that? How do you respond to the question, well, what is truth? How would you answer if someone said, tell me, what is truth? The interesting thing about it is that you can't answer that question with any words, because if there is no truth, then words have no meaning. You can't say, I made a statement and it means this and it always means this. In fact, it changes. And we see that happening, don't we? Where people go back and they see things that were said 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 200 years ago. And they say, well, I know that when he said that then, he meant this, but that's not what it means now. So therefore, that's not what it meant then. See, if there is no truth, then words have no meaning. And so everything is left up to a personal interpretation, how a person interprets reality, in which case there is no reality. It's all just your interpretation of reality. Well, that may be a little bit deep into the woods there, and maybe I'm going a little bit deeper than I ought to for my own good, right? But it's an interesting thought to ask, what is truth? Jesus' response to that in general is, I am truth. And in fact, we could say the book of John is a response to that question. The entire book of John is to say that Jesus is truth. Jesus has said to him what prompted this question. Pilate says, you're a king. And Jesus said, well, you say that I'm a king. But in fact, the reason I was born and came into the world, now that's just stop right there. Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Jesus says, here's the reason that I was born. Here's the reason I came into the world. Well, I think we ought to listen to that. What does he say? What is the reason Jesus was born? Why did Jesus come to the world? To testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What does that mean? To testify to truth. I was born for this, to testify to the truth. Well, I think it means at least to tell the truth, right? He was born to tell the truth. But it's more than that. He was born to tell about the truth. And that's true. He tells about the truth, but it's more than that. It's to give witness to the truth, to bear witness to what the truth is. And maybe that's closer to what the word testify means, to give witness to. But I think you could also say it is maybe a fuller sense, is to reveal the truth. Jesus came to reveal truth to the world. And we think of our world as postmodern, but I think that our world is a lot like the first century. When Jesus came into the world, a lot of the things that we believe were the things that the Greeks and the Romans believed. That there is no truth, that whatever you want to make it to be, well, that's what it is. And whatever you say truth is for you, well, that's your truth. You're that people say that speak your truth. Well, you don't speak your truth, you speak the truth. But Jesus says, look, I'm here to reveal truth to you. In John 14, we know it's not one of our passages today, but John 14, he says, I am the truth. With this whole argument, I think, is central to John's gospel. That's why he starts his gospel at really before creation. In the beginning was the Word. That phrase that comes right out of Genesis. In the beginning was the Word. He starts with creation. And when you start with creation, you are saying, I am telling you universal truths. Universal truths. So that's what takes us to chapter 1. When we go back to chapter 1, and he says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. In verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld, we saw, we observed his glory. Glories of the only begotten, the only one, the only Son from the Father, full of grace and full of truth. We could talk about that, full of grace, but our focus today is on being full of truth. That Jesus is full of truth. He is truth. That he is the embodiment of truth. And what does that mean when we say that God is truth? Well, I think that means that God is faithful. At the very least, God is faithful, that God is steadfast, that God is not capricious like the Greek and Roman gods were, where they changed what they wanted, they changed their minds, they said one thing, they did another. This is what they were used to when they talked about God. But he brings a statement of truth to God, that he is faithful to his promises, that he is steadfast, he is consistent, he is reliable. These are things we know about him. He always loves and he always cares for his own. He always hates sin. He's always for justice. He's always against deception. He always keeps his promises. His judgments are always right. His judgments are always revealing truth. This is who Jesus is. He is the one who is truth. He is revealing, testifying to truth. And this is showing us who God is, this character of God that is so different. And you see, we're left with a challenge, because if there is no truth, then there is no God. And if there is no God, there is no hope. There is no peace. There is no joy. There is no future. There is no certainty. There is no freedom. Because all of these things are built on the idea that there is a God who is true, who knows truth, who upholds truth, who is truth. And this is true, this statement is true only of Jesus in all of history. He is the only one who knows truth, upholds truth, and is truth. He changed our view, our entire understanding of a God when Jesus came and revealed, testified to, showed us, here is the character of God in the way that he acted and the way that he moved. This is who God is. And this God is the one who, when you know him, you're set free. That's John chapter 8, the last passage in this. Knowing him, knowing who he is, knowing this God, because there is a God, there is truth. And because there is truth, there can be freedom. So the real question is not, is there truth? Is there absolute truth? The real question is, will you follow the truth? Will you be his disciple? Will you follow him? And what we see in our culture today, I believe, is not people rejecting truth. It is ultimately people rejecting God. They don't want to believe there is a God, because if there is a God, then there is truth. And if there is truth, then that means there is a right and a wrong. And that's a realization that I've been wrong. And now as believers, we see that and go, boy, that's good news. Yeah, I've been wrong, but I've been saved. He's forgiven my wrong. But if you don't believe in Jesus and all you have is I'm wrong, well, that's a lonely place to be. That's a lonely place to be. The only path to hope, the only path to freedom is to know the truth, and to know that truth is Jesus. He is our only hope. Well, I hope this helped you today as you get ready to teach this coming Sunday. Thanks so much for being faithful to the Lord, faithful to your church, to your small group, and preparing and being ready to share the gospel with them. And I pray that God will use this time in John as you talk about truth to help you be a better teacher and your students better disciples of Christ. We'll see you next time.